Unicorn Dispatch Live, coming directly to you through a browser, which I feel like is what we're going to be talking about today. I am your host, Bryson Bort. I am the founder and CEO of Scythe. That's what pays the bills. This is what makes me happy, is Unicorn Dispatch Live, finding interesting people out in industry or around industry. Stay tuned. We're going to be bringing some folks outside of cybersecurity on some future episodes. And just what's cool, what's happening, and learning a little bit more about what's going on in our world. So with that, I am joined by the field CISO of SquareX, John. John, say hi to everyone.
Hey, everyone. Good to be on the show.
Very well done. So what mistakes in life have brought you to this point on this show right now with your crazy host?
Wow, what mistakes? I think that the most recent mistake was RSA. RSA was the most recent mistake. Went out there and met you, Bryson. That was a few months ago. And I think we had some really good conversations. And but before that, it was just a series of, pushing myself up into leadership roles and finding myself as a CISO. And then, it's, maybe a tough gig being a CISO. So.
Well, you were also in the CISO workshop I taught, right?
I don't think so. I think we had some conversations on at one of the adversary villages. I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, but
yes, you're right. You and I were both on the adversary village panel at RSA. Now I am remembering this. Yeah.
Right.
And you and I did most of the talking.
Yeah, we had a lot of conversation. And
it was basically the John and Bryson show, and there were like 4 other people.
It was good. It was a good conversation. I think that the guys had some good ideas on their perspectives on managing adversaries. But I think it's different. It's different being a buyer, and buying services and buying capabilities, and how do you implement them? So I definitely, from a CISO vantage, it was I probably had more feedback than usual.
So what does SquareX do, and how does that set us up for what we're going to be talking about browsers today?
So SquareX is a vendor of browser security products, right? So in particular, we have a browser security extension that goes in your browser, doesn't matter what operating system and what browser, and we help you secure it by helping you detect attacks, phishing attacks, or helping you with DLP objectives, or even secure access is capable through the browser as well. So that's what SquareX does, right? And we were founded by a guy named Vivek Ramachandran, who a lot of red teamers and pen testers know, because he had founded a company called Pen Tester Academy. And that kind of, after he sold that company, he was looking for something else to do, and he thought that browsers needed more security. So that's how he entered this space. So okay. I joined the company in February after being CISO for Dyson, the vacuum and fan and hair product company based out of Singapore. So I met Vivek in Singapore as well.
So what have you learned in your 6 months on the job as a field CISO? Actually, let's back up. What is a field CISO? I think that people a lot of time, this is one of the things we've tackled on the show. We've had a couple of CISOs, because a lot of folks in the industry really don't know what a CISO is. And a field CISO is even something different.
Yeah. And I'm still trying to figure out what a field CISO is also. So I'll just start with that. But what I do at SquareX, and one of the reasons for me joining is to help people understand that there are gaps in how we defend. In particular, the way that we work has changed a lot. And I was kind of surprised by this fact as well. But as a field CISO, what I do is I feel like I spend a lot of time evangelizing. I have a webinar, I'm doing podcasts, and spending time on sales calls and with the product team, trying to align like what capabilities and what it is that we're seeing as gaps, and make sure they get into the product, but even also explain to other CISOs and heads of security and engineering what's going on and where their gaps are. And trying to get them to see that there's a some more to do with respect to security.
Okay.
I'm not sure I answered the question, but I think sometimes field CISOs are.
Well, so it's a vendor role, right?
It's a vendor
I've
role.
not seen a field CISO in an enterprise organization. So I think it's, first of all, it's worth pointing out, right? That's a product vendor position. And then you're effectively the senior executive on the ground that, right, we have in the traditional sales process, right? We have the first person who gets the meetings, a BDR or an SDR. We have the sales engineer and the account executives who are working together to do the business and the technical part of the sales process. But then a field CISO is an executive, I think, that's there to work directly at the strategic level with the customer, because it's more than just buying a tool. And I think there's an area where a lot of customers and vendors fail is both sides expect the sale to be the point, and it isn't, right? Tools don't make anything happen. Policy, people, process make things happen. Technology just gets us there faster. And so a field CISO is able to help strategically set how are we going to do policy, process, and people to fully take advantage of that tool implementation. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, I think that since I've been a CISO a few times, I have some experience in understanding, like, how do we defend, right? What is it that we're doing? What kind of tools do we have, and how big of a problem this is versus that problem? And it really depends on the industries. I think for when I'm engaging with the customer in the sales process, I'm looking to see, like, where do we kind of fit, and sometimes we fit really well and sometimes we don't fit. If it's not a good fit, I'm probably just going to call out that it's not a good fit. You don't have the problem. You don't have the problem that we solve, or I can't see how we could help you solve it. And that has been the case in a couple of situations. Or or just helping the sales and the system engineers kind of understand the problem from the customer's perspective and how it kind of fits in the rest of their strategy, that customer strategy. Because, a lot of times, and having been on the buy side myself many times, the vendors often think that whatever tool they have is a panacea, that it's going to solve all of my problems. And that's rarely the case. And again, I think that part of it is just kind of trying to figure out, like, how do we fit strategically into that company's, portfolio of other technology that they have. And a lot of it is that a lot of folks have different tools, like M365, they might have an E5 license, et cetera. And they think that they have a lot of the capabilities that they need to defend their organization in that suite. However, there are definitely gaps along the way. And I think that's how I kind of got involved is, I was definitely M365 E5 customer and had a lot of capabilities.
You had a lot of money too, then.
I had a lot of money. And a lot of good consultants that were working for me. And what surprised me was that I was doing an intellectual property protection program, trying to identify insider risks inside the company. And as a result, I must have had like 144 line items and use cases that we were trying to cover off on. And a lot of them had to do with SaaS products and how do we protect things that are going on different networks. And I was surprised that how many gaps I had. And that's really how I kind of got engaged with this product, was through being surprised by the gaps that I was seeing, even though I thought I had it all, right? So
we are always students, and once we stop learning, I think is the when we truly die. And so why browsers? Why do we care about browsers, right? There are all of these things that everyone's got to worry about. Why should I worry about browsers, John?
Well, I think the main reason to worry about browsers is because that's most of your initial access is going to happen through a browser. Most of what we look at, and I don't know if this is right. I think there's kind of two schools of thought here, right? But it seems to be that we have a lot of focus on end users inside of our business, and there's good reason for that. They generate a lot of entropy, and that's not bad. It's just, it's just they work and they do things, and as a result, they find themselves in different situations that maybe aren't the safest places.
Can you elucidate on that? What do you mean by entropy in that context?
Entropy meaning that it's hard to predict what it is that a user is going to do, even with the best intentions and having the best products. And I have the M365 E5 license, and I'm giving them Teams, and I'm giving them SharePoint, I'm giving them Outlook, and I'm giving them all these tools that they can work in. That doesn't mean that they're going to work in those tools. Invariably, they're going to sign up to other SaaS applications, or they're going to try to access their email through this browser or that browser, or not use the Outlook client. I just don't know what users are going to do. And the more users you have, the more entropy you have, because these people are bringing their experiences from wherever they came from into the company, and then they're going out and trying to use Figma in the browser, or they're trying to use Trello to do project management, even though there are tools that I've already provided as part of my IT contracts, right?
Okay.
So that's the entropy that I'm talking about. And like I said, it's not good or bad, and some of it's business led, but a lot of it is just users trying to find the tools that are help them do their work the best, but invariably they end up stumbling into other cybersecurity problems. So that's what I mean by entropy.
Okay. So the browser is probably, email, some Microsoft Office tools, and the browser are pretty much the average work experience.
I think.
Sorry, go on.
Go ahead.
No, and so the browser is interesting because you and I have been around the block for a while, and it's funny, right? We go from thick client to thin client and back and forth, and we as an industry, right? I remember when Citrix was the answer, and then it was like, no, we got to do it here, and then we keep going back and forth on these things, and the browser is sort of the middle ground on it, because first of all, browsers were originally designed as like a mini operating system. Two, that mini operating system functions as a software thin client into it. So the internet connection is the most important out of the browser. Without it, it doesn't do anything. Whereas the other two tools are more client server architecture. So that's the surface area of the browser from the internet access. Because I always say, like, a hacker can't hack what they can't touch. Well, browsers are meant to be touched. That's how they're used, and that's how they're designed.
Yes, I think that like you said, I'm a little bit older than you, and but I remember using mainframes and doing my expenses on mainframes and such like that. And we kind of get away from these very, very thin clients that are just connected to some centralized computer. Now we have decentralized computing, but we were still inside of like data centers and private offices, and we were building a lot of thick client server apps, and we used to have to deploy software to everything, right? So every time you wanted a new application, you had to deploy it back to the endpoint, and the user went into that endpoint with that thick client and accessed it. And then as the cloud era started, and our browsers got more sophisticated, right? Before they were just a rendering engine and they just rendered HTML. And I don't know if people remember from the mid 90s how ugly websites were and how very little was actually processed in the browser. But today we have single page applications, and we have incredible features inside of the browser that we can use. I mean, we're, in this browser right now doing this live streaming, right? And those weren't possible, 10 years ago. That wasn't possible 10 years ago. But with HTML5 and all these other protocols that we have available in the browser, it is like a little operating system. But instead of having our own data centers and our own private offices, today we work in a very much more decentralized way, meaning that we have many SaaS apps available to us. We have a lot of point-to-point connections between the browser and those SaaS apps. And we spend a lot of time in a browser today just because it's so easy to deploy an application inside an enterprise environment by just having web access to it. right? So now I don't even have to deliver a thick client app down to a system so that a user can go do his job. Now I just give them a URL and there you go. Now we've deployed a software and we didn't have to do anything to manage that endpoint any further. So we got a lot of benefits from using the web, but in today's world with cloud and SaaS, and the more of the capabilities that are coming in SaaS apps and more extensions and everything that are building additional capabilities that we can leverage from the browser, we have a much more complicated attack surface to deal with. Lots of different places that we can be attacked.
We have a question from the audience. I'm going to ask it. I think it was what you were talking about with entropy earlier. So I want to get that as a clarification and then additional, which is shadow SaaS applications a major issue for organizations to monitor and restrict? And so I saw that as a part of the entropy comment you made earlier.
I think so. I think that shadow SaaS in particular, this is one was really a surprise to me. I had done an audit when I was at Dyson, and in that audit, we were just trying to figure out like what our SaaS apps were, and we had maybe 238 apps or so, somewhere in that mid 200 apps that were part of our conditional access, SSO, MFA capabilities. But I was surprised to learn that we had another 600 plus apps that were not part of our conditional access, MFA, and SSO capabilities. There were people logging in to these systems, with just their, John.Carse@Dyson.com credentials, those kinds of credentials. And some of them were just, or even logging in and getting OAuth scope access to those apps. And so we had, like I said, another 600 apps. So about 70% of my environment wasn't covered. And as a CISO, that's incredibly alarming to me, because that means that I have a lot of data that's all over the place, a lot of data sprawl. I might have intellectual property that's all over the place as well. So I do think it's something that is a major issue for organizations, and that they need to do their best to monitor it. I don't know how well you can restrict it, but and you can, obviously you can, otherwise, it'd be hard to have a browser detection and response tool if you can't actually restrict anything. But you need to be able to figure out how to monitor it and how to restrict it, and how do you contain it? Because I think it's a source of having loose data. I used to worry about, I'll put it a different way. I used to worry about databases, and I used to worry about people downloading files to their desktops. And then I would have these DLP tools that were looking for this stuff happening all the time. And I was considered like a primary use case and then a secondary use case. And then I started worrying about tertiary use cases where people were moving files to other systems. Now we're in this world with so many SaaS apps where we could have this data sprawled all over the place that I have way more worries about where the data is and where our intellectual property is stored today than I did, 10 years ago, for sure. I hope I answered.
Yeah, you did. And so how does SquareX approach that part? Is that in scope? I guess that's where, let's go back to what SquareX is. What exactly is in the scope of what you're doing for browser security? And then what's outside of that, and or your roadmap for how you're looking at that?
So what we do is we have an extension that goes in the browser. And if you're an enterprise, you can roll it out with Intune or Jamf or whatever MDM you might have. And that takes the browser that your users are using every single day and allows us to make that a secure browsing experience. And what I mean by that is we can detect threats that are being launched at you, or maybe you go to a watering hole, or someone sends you an email and it redirects you to a link that goes through and you're being asked to log into a website, so those kinds of attacks, or people are asking you to download malicious files or whatever it is those attackers are doing. We have threat detection and mitigation that allows that to be blocked. But then we also have DLP tools, meaning that like blocking clipboard access to unsanctioned applications. And this is where we start talking about, shadow SaaS and those kinds of problems. And then also OAuth scopes and then extensions. So anything that's happening inside the browser, we can monitor and stop from happening. We can then allow for those DLP use cases to make sure that you have sanctioned apps, that you may have a whitelist or something that these are applications that you're expecting people to go to. And you may allow people to go to personal Gmail to check their mail if you have a fair use policy as part of your acceptable use policy that you have at your company. But they wouldn't be able to copy and paste between a corporate app and their personal Gmail, right? So that would kind of help close those loops. And then we also have solutions around secure access. So, for example, you may have an app that is behind in your data center that you want to have access to, but you don't want to have a VPN to it. So having those ZTNA kind of solutions allow you to get access to that app without anyways, but I don't know without what, but without too much complexity, right? And you can still access it right there in the browser, whether it's SSH, RDP, or web app. So those are the use cases.
So I wanted to pull this one in then, because this is what I was getting at, which is, why do we care about browsers, right? And we sort of talked about it, but
yeah.
From an initial access, that's how I get in. So I can use the browser to break in, and that's how I breach the enterprise. And then in a post-access actions on objective, I can use credentials that I can harvest from browsers. I can use other internal applications that might have access, or credentials or APIs that are built in. So what's becoming most common? What do you see in browser attacks starting from most common?
Well, I think that the most common is just going to be your phishing attacks and identity, people trying to steal identity so they can have your credentials. I think those are still going to be the most common. I think when I look at the Mandiant reports and the Palo Alto reports, I think IBM just came out with their data breach report a few days ago. But if you look at those reports, about 60 or 70% of the attacks that end up in an incident response actually traverse the browser to begin that initial access, right? And that's just, I think, traditional kind of attack surface, meaning that I'm trying to get onto, Bryson's computer and then start figuring out like what's going on.
Good luck doing that.
Yeah. And so that's pretty traditional kind of use cases. But I think what we're seeing a lot more of today is people stealing OAuth scopes and or setting up a website where you are getting something of value. Maybe you're going to a drawing app on the web, but it's hosted by an attacker. And as you log in, you sign in with Google or you sign in with Microsoft. When you do that, it's going to ask you for some credentials. So that OAuth scope, it's going to say, hey, I need this information and these rights so that you can do whatever you need to do with this drawing app. And what we're seeing is that we are seeing more cases where the rights that are being asked of course, are going to be greater than what you actually need to do that work. But it gives access to your OneDrive or your Google Drive or other applications that you didn't expect. And so once they have that scope and those session tokens so that they can maintain persistence and have that foothold in that, they can use those sessions to peruse your OneDrive without you even knowing that someone's looking around. They can start deleting your files or harvesting other information from your system. Things that you would normally keep on your endpoint now are in OneDrive, and I think we're seeing a lot of that in most enterprises today. But those are the kinds of attacks I think are starting to become more prevalent, that are happening through the browser, that would be very difficult for like an EDR or a SWG or secure web gateway or to detect or prevent.
How much does EDR or antivirus help me in this at all?
Not at all, right? Not at all, surprisingly enough, right? I think that couple things is that the amount of visibility that an EDR has into the applications that are running on your systems are like nil. And that's true of the other fat apps that you have running on your system as well. So if you have like Photoshop.exe and you double click on it and it's running, the EDR doesn't have any kind of inspection capabilities inside Photoshop, which is fine, right? But I think when you have 80% of your time that you're spending on a computer is in a browser, and you're going to, hundreds and thousands of interactions that you're going through a browser, having some way to inspect what's happening in the browser becomes something that you want to have visibility on. And the EDR doesn't have that capability as well.
So something I'd thrown in the comments a few minutes ago, I just want to, for those who are more listening than watching, when we were talking about shadow SaaS, it's also worth noting we were talking about how EDR is not able to log or monitor a lot of these activities because it's a valid process that's already running. And for those of you who aren't aware, there are a number of attack techniques where we can inject and do process hollowing and take advantage of things that have already been effectively authenticated and okayed by your system, which is, again, why these things are living off the land and why they are hard to catch. And I just wanted to note that Shadow SaaS also is a great hard to catch command and control and exfiltration method. So what your browser is doing is an easy way for me to manage my malware and then also be able to get the things that I want back out of it. And then following from that, we have a particular threat, which is the Redline Stealer. So how often do you run into Redline Stealer? And then I guess, what's your view, I guess, threat intelligence landscape of kind of the big bad four we always see, Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, and their prevalence of using these kinds of browser attacks and techniques?
So I don't think I know this. Is this Redline like Mandiant Redline? Or is this like from the forensic tool kind of?
No, it's a malware stealer.
Oh yeah, I don't know this one.
Yeah, so it's here. I'm pulling up from Malpedia as we speak. Redline Stealer is a malware available on underground forums for about $100-$150, and harvests information from browsers such as saved credentials, autocomplete data, and credit card information. System inventory is also taken when running on a target machine to include details such as the username, location data, hardware configuration, and information regarding installed security software. Recent versions have added the ability to steal cryptocurrency. FTP and IM clients are also apparently being targeted by this. So
sure. So yeah, Redline is, you got to get it running on the outside the browser process. I guess you could get it running inside the browser process as well, depending on, how you can get a user to get the executable started. I mean, I know that we have like browser sync jacking kind of proof of concepts that, you can go watch that video where we have malicious code running inside the browser process that allows us to look at what's going on the system. So I think that's same kind of trajectory. I think that from my perspective, I'm not really looking for those kinds of things. The Redline sounds like definitely something that I would expect my EDR to see, catch, and prevent. I think that where browser detection and response would be helpful is identifying that before, as it traverses the browser. Don't even let it get on the system, but and not let it install. And does that? I think I'm kind of answering. I'm about to pivot to something a little bit adjacent to this.
Stuart will jump back in if he is dissatisfied.
Okay, so I hope you're not dissatisfied, Stuart, but please let me know if you are. I think that the interesting thing about what's going on in browser spaces as well, especially when you're like downloading tools, a lot of folks think that they're, one of the things that we started professing as a cybersecurity practitioners is encrypted channels, encrypted tunnels, right? And so we wanted to have, secure connections between our browser and our SaaS apps, right? I don't think that's actually what we wanted, because I mean, a lot of us came, up during a time when we had intrusion prevention systems, and we wanted to have certificate pinning so that we could see all the traffic and then block malicious traffic as it was moving across the wire. We've kind of pivoted away from that to, Diffie-Hellman encryption that you can't just stick a certificate in and undo it, right? It's, point-to-point encrypted between the two points. the browser in the SaaS product or whatever app that's going to, right? I think what's interesting about secure web gateways and those kinds of tools that are wanting to inspect the traffic that's on the wire is that they can, like, if you do like HTTP download and you say, hey, I'm going to download this file, it can detect that. It can detect those kinds of downloads happening, across that channel through HTTP. However, they start to have problems when you are using gPRC or WebRTC or other protocols that are being used in single pane apps in the browser. And we also have seen people doing what we call last mile reassembly. And there's two ways. It's either exfiltration, where you can take a file or whatever content that you want to exfiltrate or download and break it up into smaller pieces and then send it across the wire through the browser, right? And those are other examples of where having some visibility in the browser is useful, so that you can detect either the download of malicious files through not standard channels versus using, or again, exfiltration data through non-standard channels as well. So again, what's nice about having a tool in the browser is that everything's kind of clear text in the browser. It's no longer, for it to be rendered or for it to get down to the system, it had to be in clear text. So it's almost like another great place to do inspection is right there in the browser to see what's happening on your network.
So that leads us to browser extensions. So how do we manage browser extensions? Part of that is a configuration management problem from the enterprise, right? What do I allow? What do I try to allow list, deny list within this third-party application, the browser itself? And then the threat taking advantage of what those configurations might be and how you can defend them.
Right. Definitely browser extensions are just random code that you're having running inside a process space. So anything that you can imagine you would want to do inside of on a system, browser extensions are a way to do that inside the browser process as well, right? So is it another attack vector? Absolutely. What we're seeing is a couple different activities that threat actors are doing. One of them is just creating new browser extensions that mimic another browser extension and pushing those on the wire. That's one of the ways they're just putting their malicious code, and they may do exactly what you expect them to do. Like, let's say you have a proxy server that you want to have in Chrome. Great. Now you have a proxy server that you can access your local, SOX proxy through SSH through your browser, right? Great use cases for developers and engineers that want to do work. What we're seeing again is that people are taking that good code base and then they're creating versions of it that are malicious, right? That they're stealing information and doing other kinds of activity that you did not expect that extension to do. And then we're seeing that actors are actually buying extensions and then adding malicious code to them, right? So if you find some extension that 1 million people are using, you buy it because that person may not want to maintain it any longer, like a lot of the open source software that we see in our development frameworks as well. And the other vector is just trying to take over other extensions as well. So create your own, take one over, legitimately, like you buy it or you become the maintainer of it. Or third, we're seeing even like OAuth scope attacks where they're stealing access to that code base and then putting in their own code as well. So extensions are something you want to watch for, not just the code, but the rights that they're asking for. A lot of, in the cybersecurity community, as a CISO, I see that our developers and engineers, bless their heart, are asking for applications to run with way too much rights. So they're not using the concept of least privilege when they're writing code or using proper role-based access control on a system. They might be running a web server with root, which you as attackers would love, but me as a CISO do not love. we see that same kind of activities with respect to extensions and OAuth scopes, where developers are asking for too much rights with their extensions and too much right with OAuth scopes that they're asking the users.
Joseph chimes in. Currently, that's where they're at. Restricted extensions and a hardened operating system and all the acronyms. Doesn't help us catch anyone using a shadow SaaS solution until they try to download or upload a file, and it gets flagged. And that's commonly what we see in core defense is things that are in memory, in process, very hard to understand and see. Things that touch disk, boom, we got you. Then it gets flagged, and we find that they've been trying out something they heard about for a while. Monitoring DNS for unusual calls can help, but going that granular with DNS monitoring feels impractical.
So I am not surprised at all that even in very restricted environments that, I mean, again, you're in a browser, even if you have browsers that you manage, let's say that you have Chrome and you have Chrome Enterprise and you're managing those browsers. We get into this kind of problem with IT where we want to be flexible enough that we allow people to do their job. But once we start interjecting like processes in place that you have to call the help desk and add an application to your system, now our help desk costs go up, right? So IT is always in this space where they want to harden as much as they can, close off activities, and then try to put processes in place to keep things under control. And that's hard to do with shadow SaaS. I mean, again, you have a web app, you're not really going to be able to restrict because we don't work in private data centers anymore. We're working with AWS, GCP, Azure, in any of the regions that you might want to work on. And you're really just not going to start blocking access to AWS, GCP, or Azure for anything, because you're going to run into a problem where this ephemeral IP address that someone's using right now was core to DocuSign or some other product that your company uses. You're just not going to block it. You know, it's going to be difficult to do that using SASE or secure web gateways. Again, when you start doing this in the browser where it's clear, you can start differentiating between SaaS apps that are sanctioned, that they're logging in with the right kind of credentials. So, for example, in the Gen AI space, you may have folks that have personal chat GPT, and that may be okay. However, you don't want people uploading confidential information into personal chat GPT where you have no relationship or contractual structure. Again, this is CISO kind of thinking to keep, to limit your risk, right? But you do want them to use enterprise chat GPT. In the browser, you can differentiate those two. And the same thing with sanctioned apps versus unsanctioned apps in the SaaS space. So I said a lot, and yeah, monitoring DNS is interesting as well. It's a voluminous log data source, and trying to figure out what's going on in that space is hard. And again, when you're not able to differentiate the context of a DNS record versus the context of like how they're logging in, DNS becomes a little not very useful from a control perspective.
So following back to credential theft, stealing tokens and one login type authentication and then logging on somewhere else with the token. So this kind of gets back to what I was saying is the setup is there's effectively two phases of an attack a browser's used. One, the initial breach. And certainly I can get tokens from somewhere else that I can use for initial breach. And then two, which is I believe the most common, is me using those credentials and that user access to get where I want to get. Attackers are not omniscient. Attackers do not get everything on the initial breach. It's what happens afterward that typically is where I make my proverbial money. So how do you add to that?
Yeah, definitely on the one login type auths, right? Where you're, it's so easy. I mean, you can go out today, set up a website and do a one login, web page, and then you could say, hey, I want to have your name, your email, and then I want to have access to your OneDrive, right? You can set up that login page just anywhere for any kind of reason and steal those tokens, and then those become like non-human identities, depending on how you configure your configure that, you could have a session token that you say there's no expiration date, and then now you have a non-human token that you can use to get into that environment forever. And users are not really that knowledgeable about about OAuth and the scopes and what it is that's being asked for. So the likelihood of them making a mistake and giving too much permission, now I was talking about OneDrive, but I could have been asking for access to your email as well, or I could have been access to um, other applications that you might have inside your environment that would be good places for me to launch another internal attack. Like I could use those, your Outlook, or your Exchange token to go and look at your email, understand how your organization works, and do business email compromise, or launch other kinds of attacks from inside as well. So definitely something you want to watch for. And again, because we can see those OAuth scopes that are being asked for inside the browser, those are control points that you can do with a good browser security tool like SquareX.
You're allowed to be shameless. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
So I answered some of this in the comment, but this is where I wanted to pull back some things. So John was talking about earlier about the challenge of not blocking legitimate processes. And this is why prevention is psychologically where we all get excited. But the reality is this is why detection is actually most of cybersecurity defense, because you have to be almost 100% sure before you stop something, because the second time you do it, your tool gets ripped out, you get demoted, right? You're less. And so one of the recommendations I have here from a detection perspective that I put in the chat is one example of catching this is share access auditing. John, what else do you think?
Well, definitely you want to, you definitely, there's a whole bunch of audit kind of capabilities that you want to do. I mean, you can go into your tools and you can go look at OAuth scopes that have been provided to folks. And you want to, you definitely want to audit any number of control points on a regular basis. Are we talking about recommend like Stuart's comment? Is that related to your question, or am I getting?
Yes, his question led to me broadening it and giving some context and then giving an example. But John, you're the field CISO. Take us where we're supposed to go.
Definitely what you want to be able to do, right, from a login perspective, is you want people to be using MFA as much as possible, right? And this is another place where people get fatigued. And again, you're always kind of trying to balance security with usability in your environment. Because if you start, to Bryson's point, when you start preventing things, and prevention is the most expensive way to run your business, right? That's good for military environments, but when you start getting enterprise IT, when you start having lots of preventative kind of controls in place, as Bryson said, it makes you feel good from a cyber perspective, but your CISO is getting hammered with IT asking questions about why they're doing this, and a lot of political pressure from the other business leaders in their organization that are feeling like they can't do their job. And then you have again, help desk costs where people are being called into help desk to figure things out. So this is all just trying to balance the risk and the reward of being in a business. What we want to see is controls that are effective, right? Meaning that the likelihood of it being wrong, because when it's all said and done, things that are good in the world is this much. And then you have things that are bad in the world, there's maybe this much. And then this gap in between is the gray area where you just don't know, right? I mean, it just doesn't matter. I mean, you might be a DocuSign shop and DocuSign might be a great app for you, so it's on the good list. But you go to another organization and DocuSign is not what you use, so it's on the bad list, right? So what's gray in the middle is there's way more gray than there is anything else. So those gray is where your users live, right? And we were talking about entropy earlier. where they go in Shadow SaaS world, who knows, right? But what you do want them to do is you want them to log in with certain kinds of credentials, right? So you definitely want to, if you cannot block them outright, then you want them to have, you would rather them log in with SSO than not SSO, right? So push them down that direction. So if they have a one login kind of a way of connecting to this new Shadow SaaS app, I'd rather them go down that path than I just put in my username and password and have new credentials set up that I can't manage or monitor anymore. It's not entirely true, but we'll get to that in a second. But typically in your organization that someone logged in with John.Carse at squarex.com and I put my own credential, my own password in there, the likelihood of a company being able to find that, if I did it once, maybe never. If I do it like every single day, maybe you could start to see it. But there's different layers of control. So, but you do want them to use some sort of, MFA, as well. But when you're in the browser, you can kind of start seeing that kind of activity. You can see when people are doing password reuse. You can see when they're using weak passwords. And with the kind of controls that you can put around credentials, if people are going to have SaaS apps, then push them towards using stronger credentials. And those are things that you can do inside the browser with our tool, for as an example. But with security tools built into the browser, you can say, don't reuse passwords, have stronger passwords, use MFA, push towards SSO, those kinds of activities, so that at least you can try to pull people back into a secure structure, even though you may not be able to stop them from doing whatever they're doing. Stuart, I hope I answered your question.
Don't worry, he's keeping them coming.
Okay.
So, did you have any advice on dealing with Microsoft or other vendors for detection improvements and getting signatures tweaked?
Wow.
When I hear signatures tweaked, I think of a CrowdStrike challenge.
Well, I mean, I think it's this is a difficult activity. I can tell you.
How do I do detection engineering for browsers?
How do you do detection engineering for browsers? Very, very much the same way that you do detection engineering elsewhere, right? You get the telemetry and you figure out like what's going on, and you start.
That's how you get to Russia. Check. Okay.
So the what's interesting about our tool, right, is that when you want to have a new policy, we have a Gen AI tool where you just type in, you say that I want to block all QR codes, right? And it'll go and generate, or I want to block all ITAR restricted companies or countries. Whatever that is that you want to do, you can just type it in Gen AI. It'll go write the policy for you and, it'll give you, if it's a bad prompt, it'll give you ways to make the prompt better so you can get a good policy. But the other nice thing about our tool is it's also Lua script based. So if you really want to get into the details of like what's going on, you can write a Lua script for it as well. And actually the Gen AI will write a Lua script for you too, that you can start with. And then if you want to, tweak it, you can get into it. So if you want to, find out, if you want to, for your internal apps that may not have like a, you may not have the same kind of frameworks that are being used in commercial SaaS apps. You can write your own content for those apps so you can secure them better and make sure that people are logging in with a secure browser before they get to that apps, and you can prove that conditional flow and those kinds of things. So lots of things you could do. With respect to dealing with Microsoft and other vendors for detection improvements, I think that's very difficult. Very difficult to do. I've met multiple times the CISOs for Microsoft or talk to their, security product teams. And I've told them, and my account execs telling them about the problems I'm having with Purview or Defender or whatever. And this is not specific to Microsoft. It's any of these big vendors. The likelihood of my tweaks getting in there are low if you're expecting Microsoft to do it for you. If you have your own capabilities, that's better. It's a better place to be. There are definitely good detection engineering suites out there. I mean, I personally have used one called Anvil Logic a couple of times. They have their own SaaS product out there that allows you to do detection engineering across a lots of different environments, and then get away from Sentinel, get away from Splunk. If that's your so desire. I personally try to get away from Sentinel and Splunk and push things into different kinds of lakes. Bryson and I have different opinions on how much data is too much data. But
the NSA problem, if too much data starts to become too much data. And
yeah, but again, if you're looking for that detection improvements to happen, and you know what it is that you're looking for, then the best way to do is just have your own capability of doing it, right? Whether that's fully in-sourced, or you're going to share that opportunity, share that those opportunities with a vendor like Anvil Logic, I would say. So,
all right, this is going to be the last question to roll us out. What do you suggest for information gathering data on suspected compromised systems and things to check if been advised system may have had something wrong?
Oh, wow. So
the CMDB question.
Yeah, I mean, again, well, if we talked about CMDB, right? Just on the side, I mean, I've never seen a CMDB that was up to date, so I always think it's a crux. That's
my joke.
Yeah, no, it's a weak place to start from, and I think that cybersecurity practitioners need to take that attacker mindset on this in particular, and think, and this is in cybersecurity inspections in the military and the where cybersecurity readiness inspections. They never looked at your CMDB. They just scanned the network, figured out what was on the network, and then they started assessing. If they relied on people's CMDBs to figure out what they were going to do, we'd have so many gaps on military networks. It would be shameful, right? So CMDB, you don't need it. You have ways to figure out what's on your network and what's flowing. It's figuring out where do you need to go to get that data so you can go do it. And more than likely you have it. Gathering. What do you suggest for info gathering on suspected compromised systems? Right. My point of view has always been looking at flows around the network. Getting on a system is a little bit more difficult, and but if you have the tools and you have that capabilities, then you're going to do your sweeps like you would do during an incident response. And then looking for artifacts that are on that system. I mean, if you have some idea of what's going on, I think it'd be better to scope it. But I mean, if someone says there's something wrong with my computer, it becomes a very difficult task to kind of figure out like what may be a problem. But I'd probably start looking at network flows, DNS stuff around it first, and then kind of go into the forensic activities on the box later.
There's
Wireshark.
Yeah, Wireshark.
PCAP is wonderful, right? And PCAP doesn't lie. So if as long as it's not encrypted, you're just not getting like HTTPS traffic. I mean, or SSH traffic, becomes a little bit useless. But at least you know where those connections are going. NetFlow data is another good data set, I think, for like just figuring out what's going on. DNS, NetFlow, PCAP, if you have it, I love it. I've always been drawn to storing it, though it gets very expensive very fast.
Are you going to be at Hacker Summer Camp Vegas next week?
I am going to be at Black Hat next week.
Is there anything where anybody can find you out there?
Well, yeah, I definitely have like a Calendly link, somewhere. If someone wants to DM me on X at John Carse, or if you want to ping me on LinkedIn, I'm there. Yeah, email me at john@squarex.com as well. Anyways, I'll be around.
For those of you who want to find me next week, is my screen sharing?
Yes, it is.
Awesome. First time trying to do this. So I am the opening keynote to B-Sides Las Vegas Monday morning. I'm talking on industrial control systems Thursday afternoon at Black Hat. And then for those of you who don't know, I'm the co-founder of the ICS Village. We're back for our 10th or 11th year. I'll be there. I'm also the keynote panel at Adversary Village. And we're doing a special meet and greet Saturday at 1337 with Darknet Diaries, Ray Redacted, and a few guests that will be announced. Now we got to go to the, well, before I go to the raffle, John, any last thoughts you want to leave the audience with?
No, thank you for the questions that y'all had.
Great questions.
Bryson, thanks for the conversation and the opportunity to talk about it. I think that it is a big gap. I think the world has changed a lot since, 2005, 2010, and the advent of cloud and SaaS apps. So, be wary, know that there are gaps in your visibility in today's world, and that there are controls available to help you cover those gaps. Thanks.
So here is our raffle. And Vic, I put you in. Your question at the very end counted. So forget, how do I do this again? Oh, I just clicked to spin. It's right there on it. User interface. Stuart, I think you won. The purple Stuart won. So congratulations. Stuart, if you reach out to us at info@scythe.io, you will get a free gift card to buy some cool unicorn swag at swag.scythe.io. The rest of you are also welcome to go there. All of the proceeds go to the conservation of chubby unicorns, aka endangered rhinos. So you're doing good with it and looking cool at the same time. John, it's good to see you again, my friend.
See you next week. Bye.
Yeah, see you next week.